Hi everyone. So we're going to switch things up a bit, and now your online lecture is actually me talking to you and taking you through some of my slides. You're welcome. So this particular lecture is kind of sort of wrapping up the semester. We're almost there. And so for some of you, you had a chance to critically engage looking at social media campaigns and digital brands, or you're in the process of creating your own campaign. No matter what, you were always able to identify a goal behind the intentions of whomever, if it's not you, is putting together some kind of marketable branding initiative. And ideally, whatever they aim to do, you have to find some way to measure the success of those efforts. And so this particular lecture is all about how we measure success, the different ways of measuring success. And of course, you know it matters because a successful campaign begets more campaigns and more coins in your pocket if you are building out brand awareness, if you're targeting brand integrity, or if you are working on publicity campaigns. So with that, let's get into it. All right, so you can see all that stuff happening over there, and I'm not going to read it to you, but I'm going to break it down. So there's a reason why you want to measure success. It's just not this haphazard thing that you do, but anything that you put together, there ideally is a goal involved, and when you measure success, you want to tell whatever that goal was, did I achieve it? And so sometimes, as you can see from the very first item, is to investigate if those efforts are even meaningful. Do people like the brand? Do people like the message? Is the campaign effective? That kind of baseline tapping into the emotional or the effective responses matters. The others include understanding if specific types of methods work. If you put out a survey and no one answers it, maybe surveys aren't the best way to engage with an audience. If you offer buy one, get one free or 50% off or buy, a free giveaway, did people show up? Did people use that code? And so those different types of measurements allow you to kind of ascertain, does this work? Is it effective? Is it reaching the public? Think about it. And we've talked about this in class and we've talked about this in different modalities. Sometimes things are effective because they're catchy or they're trendy. That matters. Maybe that's what speaks to that brand or your client. Likewise, when you're wrapping up a campaign, when you're wrapping up the efforts, you kind of want to see what worked well so you can reproduce it and what didn't work well so you can revise it and reposition it. Because if it didn't work well, there might have been money and time lost. You need to be able to justify that and adjust accordingly. So take a look at all the different things over here because you know you're going to have a quiz, but understand these are different reasons why we measure and seek out if a campaign was successful or not. So right over here, just introducing you, to a few terms. One is return on investment. You might have heard that before, but what it means at its most basic level is this idea of that whatever you are spending, and that could be money, time, talent, that you're getting a return on that. And so ideally, if I'm going to spend money on a Facebook ad, I want to see that's going to be shared or liked. I want to see that it's going to actually have comments and engagement. And so you can actually talk about how that investment can be monetized and I can see that return. So that's one of the many ways in which you can look at measuring success. If you look below at the next large bullet point, others are just evaluations of effort. So this idea that if you hire someone who creates content, and many of you are creating content, the idea is, was it talked about? Was it buzzworthy? Was it shared a lot? Was it something that became thematic? And so when we talk about measurement and success, sometimes it is very numerical. You spent some dollars, you got some hits, people came to your business. Sometimes it's conversational. Sometimes you do things that put people in the kind of social circle of where your existence is, and all of a sudden having some recognition, whether it's your brand or what you do or your mission statement, matters. Think about it. If you're a political candidate and you're running for office, you want those votes. That's something that's tangible. But you also want people to know who you are. Name recognition also matters. Likewise, it's also important people know your policies and the things that you stand for, that they know your history. And so there are different ways to measure things that don't always have to be numbers. Numbers matter, don't get me wrong, but also other things equally can matter, and especially when it comes to a brand. So these are just some of the concepts I want you to focus on. Take a look at them, and I'll see you on the next slide. So really briefly on this slide, what I want to highlight is when we're talking about measuring success, sometimes we just talk about numbers and likes and things along those lines, which are fantastic, but there can also be cognitive and behavioral shifts. And that's a great way to see if a brand or a campaign actually achieved a goal. So let's say, for example, that you were hired by Chipotle and they wanted to really work on their brand because people just don't like Chipotle because they've had some bad bouts of food poisoning. And so it's not that people don't come and spend money or that they don't have enough followers on social media. It's really about the feelings about that brand, their mission, their logo, things along those lines. And so attitude change, changing behaviors, changing public awareness can also be benchmarks to kind of understand the role of success. And those may not be tangible numbers, but that's absolutely something that can be a goal, and it's absolutely something you can measure. Building on that last slide, we talked about the cognitive and behavioral aspects. And of course, as I mentioned, there are tangible things you can do as well. Social media may be likes and comments, but we can step outside of that and talk about media impressions or media mentions. And so we're going a little bit more macro, stepping outside of just our kind of social media conversation. And so what that may look like is for press days, which we talked about in 4002, but not necessarily in 2035, is what kind of coverage comes out of those events? What kind of coverage comes from press if it comes to brand awareness? Maybe it's an op-ed, maybe it's an article. How many people read it? What was the reaction? What's the temperament? Again, talking about something that's tangible and looking at something that may be more behavioral. Likewise, if you're throwing a special event, who showed up? Just that simple. It's a measurement of success. And then last but not least, as I have over here on this slide, is the idea that if there is a service offered, buy one, get one free, a discount code, how often was it redeemed? What were the sales? So if you're working with a brand and the idea is to increase their social media following, the increase in numbers is measuring success. If it was to drive more people to their website, you look at the bounce rate, the number of clicks. If it was to get people to spend more money actually in their actual brick and mortar, how much money was sold? And if you have a discount code, was that redeemed? Can you draw that back specifically to those branding or promotional efforts? So when it comes to evaluations and measuring success, there are a multitude of ways to thoughtfully engage. Depending on the goals, depending on the brand, depending on specifically where they're situated in the marketplace, you can actually tap into different ways to see if success was actually achieved. Got a couple more slides, we're almost there. So I'm just going to break apart one of the things I mentioned on the last slide and talk about specifically how we may measure success when an in-person event. So if you're in 4002, we talked about press days. This week we're talking about special events. If you're in 2035, this is literally how we take branding and really kind of make it tangible if we have a brick and mortar establishment. And so one thing are special events where people come in. One thing is where you're trying to drive people to come into your business to spend money. And then sometimes if you're working for a nonprofit, maybe it's fundraisers. What's a measure of success? If you've raised funds and how much you raise. Random. Sometimes you go to weddings, and I know it's kind of COVID, so it's hard to imagine that. And sometimes people will put kind of in the center of their tables like a hashtag with the groom and bride or the groom's or the bride's name. And they'll have people, when they post to Instagram or Twitter or Facebook, to use that hashtag. And what that means is that the couple can go back and click on the hashtag and look through all the pictures that people took. And that may seem small or something that happens all the time, but that's another form of measurement. So if you invited 100 people out to your event and you gave a hashtag, that's a way you can measure the type of engagement. You can see how many people used it, so now you have some numerical data, and you get a chance to kind of look and see the ways in which it was thoughtfully, ideally interwoven into your event. And so when it comes to new media, there's a new level of engagement that's oftentimes we don't think of. And so when you're on Twitter, when you're on Instagram, and you see a hashtag being used, it's cute, it's funny, it's trending, but that's also, for us who are now practitioners, a way to measure success. And so if we click on a hashtag and there are hundreds of thousands of people using that, that's a measure of success. If we click on a hashtag and we see the different types of engagement and it's mostly favorable, that's a measure of success. And so everything we do is with intention. And arguably everything we do is to fulfill the goals. And if those goals are successful, the only way to know is to measure those outcomes. Last but not least, I have to briefly mention kind of the hard copy social scientific measurements that we can also engage in to see the effectiveness of a campaign or brand awareness. And so many of you will tiptoe in this once you go into PR campaigns, where you will need to discuss wholeheartedly the effort you put into it and what the outcomes were related to that. And you can speak to likes, you can speak to comments, you can speak to a shift in kind of behavioral, but there's also going to be some expectancy of metrics involved. And so what that means is that you're going to have to give people surveys, and you're going to have to give them open-ended questions where they can openly respond, but also some Likert scale questions. This one's like a scale of 1 to 7, similar to what you do in every class you take, where you get to the end of the semester and you evaluate the professor. Those are different ways of measuring the success of the course, the success of that professor, and ideally you're getting a chance to have your voice heard. So those social scientific methods where we want to understand human behavior, but we also want to have tangible numbers, that's another way to measure success. Now, it's not as much fun as a hashtag, it's not as much fun at looking at social media, but it is really important because sometimes we have to understand the marriage of the two, what people are thinking, how they behave, what kind of tangible numbers came out of it, what kind of money was raised or money was spent. And so this is the way to do that. So take a look at the list I have on the side where we talk about looking at reputation, motivations, building goodwill, and things along those lines. Again, surveys are a great way to tap into that. And it could be online where you send people to a link or a different types of code they can click or hard copy. The important is you want to know kind of some specifics. You want to understand what motivated people to do things and what they liked or disliked or how things can be made better. And that may mean you need a little bit more than just likes and clicks. And so that type of measurement also matters. On the very last slide, I'm going to wrap this up and talk about what's next for both of my classes. Make sure you watch the end. See, that wasn't so painful. You made it. But before I let you go, I just want to talk through a few things, make sure that we're all on the same page. So next week is technically the last week that for 4002 we'll be together. And for 2035, even though we're mostly online, it's the last full week of classes for us because that next week is Thanksgiving. It's a short week, and then we're kind of shifting gears and are no longer getting new content. So let me walk through both classes what the next couple of weeks will look like. For 2035, next week, mark your calendars. On Thursday, November 19th at 10:30 a.m., our traditional time slot, I will host a synchronous class where I will talk about the final assignment and answer any questions regarding all of the content as you prepare for the final exam. Again, mark your calendars. Thursday, November 19th at 10:30. Same Zoom link that's in the syllabus. The syllabus is in Moodle under Introduction. I will host a synchronous, yet optional, class where we can come together, talk about the final assignment, answer any questions about the exam, because that next week we go right into Thanksgiving. You'll have a new lecture. It'll be short with the final quiz. And then that's it. No new content. Turn in your final assignment, take your final exam. We're done for the semester. For 4002, next week is our last week of in-class instruction. I canceled Tuesday's class of Thanksgiving because we're in a hybrid format. So you'll have an online lecture like you've had every week and a quiz, and we're a wrap. So next week, I will talk about the final project and the two main components that entail that project, and then also answer any questions over the course of the semester pertaining to the final exam. So next week is important because it's really that last kind of one-stop shop for us to engage before you kind of head off post-Thanksgiving to wrap up the semester. Do not, I repeat, do not let the ball drop, because once Thanksgiving hits, it'll feel like the semester's over with, but it's not. For many of you, for all of you, there's between 150 and 200 points still on the line that could make or break your grade. So you cannot forget about the last assignment. You can't forget to take the final exam because you were at home and it just skipped your mind. That's not how this works. You're an adult. So mark your calendars, get prepared, engage next week so you can leave with all the tools that you need to succeed. If you have any questions, let me know, but I hope this was helpful. I look forward to seeing your assignments, looking at those quiz grades, engaging with you on the other side.